In this video, I'm going to give you some basic strategies and tips before you take the IELTS exam so that you can be better ready on the exam day. Well, let's start with the scariest part for most people, which is writing. The most important thing you could do is study good quality examples. There are many good websites out there that will give you examples for Task 1 General, Task 1 Academic, or Task 2. So it's very good to look at examples that are near your level. That means if you're a 6 and you'd like to be a 7, then it's good to look at essays that are a little bit higher than you, not just Band 9 essays, because those will be very hard to remember when it comes time to do the test. Timing is very, very important. The test lasts for 60 minutes, and Task 1 is worth 33% of your final writing score. So that means you should spend no more than 20 minutes on Task 1 and 40 minutes on Task 2. So when you're practicing, use your watch or timer to make sure that you're only spending about 20 minutes on Task 1 and 40 minutes on Task 2. Because during the real test, you won't have a lot of time, and a lot of people do run out of time. Now, there are many different types of Task 1 and Task 2 questions. What you need to do is focus on the topics that are more difficult. So if there's a certain topic that you're less familiar with, then write more about that. For example, I am less familiar with the fashion industry. So if I was preparing for an IELTS test, I would spend more time thinking about that kind of topic rather than something like sports, which I'm much more familiar with. Now let's move on to talk about reading. The number one tip I can give for this is to write in all capital letters. If you use all capital letters, then you don't risk losing points because of spelling. Next, don't write too many words. For these answers, you usually have between 1 to 3 words to answer, or numbers. Make sure you do not write too many numbers or words because you will get no points for the score if you write too much. And don't expect to understand every word. When you're reading, you don't have to stop and worry about words you don't understand. Your goal in reading is to find the important information, and that means looking for hints and markers and keywords. It's also important to read the instructions very carefully. It could be matching or multiple choice. You have to make sure you understand the question before you get started. Next, you also have to not panic. There might be a question that you don't know the answer to. It's very common for people to get stressed and lose focus. If there's one question you don't know, have a guess and move on, because you don't want to waste time on things you don't know. You want to spend your time on things you do know. And this is really key. Reading, and I'll talk about this in listening later, this is really a vocabulary test. You're taking the questions, which you hopefully understand, and then often you are looking for synonyms, similar words, in the body of the text. So if you have a strong vocabulary base, the reading will be much easier. Timing is very important. You will have a lot of reading to do and not a lot of time to do it. So again, if you get stuck on some question that you're not sure about, you have to move on and make sure you manage your time well. The longest text is the last one, so you need to leave a lot of time for the final reading text. And also, this is really important to ignore anything you think you already know about a topic. For example, you might be a doctor, and the topic might be on health, and you think you know the answer already about a certain health topic. But it doesn't matter what you think you know. You have to find the answer in the reading text, and then that's the answer that you put on the test. So don't just think you know the answer. Make sure you find the answer in the text. Now let's move on to talk about listening, which is very similar to my tips about reading. And that is, of course, read the instructions well. You want to make sure that you're answering the question that's being asked. And the only way to do that is to read the instructions and make sure you're following them. Again, this is a vocabulary test, but it's not just vocabulary with your eyes, this is vocabulary with your ears and your ability to recognize sounds as words that you know. Again, like the reading, it's a lot about synonyms. They don't use the same words, in the text as are in the question. So you have to do some matching in your mind with synonyms and similar expressions. In every listening test, there are distractors. A very good example of this will be they ask you how much something costs. Now, they might say a price, but then change the price later. So for example, the person selling might say, oh, it's $5. And then later on, they have to change their answer. So be sure to keep listening because they do this all the time in listening tests. They'll give you an answer, but then change the answer later. And it's very often the second time they mention it that is correct. Think about the topic before you start. This will help you start thinking about vocabulary that you expect to hear in the listening text. So basically, if the topic is about fruit, just start thinking about all kinds of fruit that you know, maybe where they grow, and things like that. And it will make the listening so much easier because your mind is already ready for the topic. You have to write your answers very carefully. This means use your best handwriting and don't use abbreviations because the person checking your test probably won't know what the abbreviation is. So write full answers, don't write too many words, and later, if you get lost, meaning you don't understand what's happening in the listening, keep focus. You will understand more later, but there will be parts that you don't understand. Just like the reading, you have to keep fighting and make sure that you catch and focus on what you do understand, not on what you don't. Now let's move on to talk about how to prepare for the speaking part. You should be warming up days, if not weeks, before you do your speaking test. This means speaking English as much as possible. Speaking is like a sport. You're basically using the muscles in your mouth and your brain to communicate ideas. It's not studying. You really need to practice. Maybe your family will tolerate you speaking English to them at home. Maybe you have an English speaking group where you just talk or talk about IELTS topics. Whatever you need to do, try to speak as much as possible in English up before you do the test. And that means practicing at home. You could practice alone and record yourself, or you could get online and find a speaking partner, or you could pay for, online lessons, maybe through a website like italki. It's really important to just practice. Right before the exam, it's not about learning new words, it's about getting out the words that you already know. That's the most important thing before you start your speaking test. Many people don't realize this, but you can ask the examiner to explain a question in more detail. For example, if there's one word that you don't know in the question, you could say, oh, what does blank mean? Now, I recommend you don't do this for every question because then the examiner will know that your proficiency isn't that strong. So some websites will tell you, oh, just keep asking, the examiner to speak more, but the examiner will probably take this as a sign that your English proficiency is not that high. So don't be shy to ask a few questions, but don't ask a question after every question. You also need to remember to extend your answers. Always think that you're answering why at the end of a question. For example, oh, do you prefer the sky by day or the sky at night? Oh, I prefer the sky by day because I love the color blue and it makes me feel calm. If you do this, this is much better than just a short one-sentence answer. Because if you don't give a full answer, the examiner will always ask you why. Now, my last tip, and I think it's the most important, is don't be afraid to lie. This goes for speaking or writing. So if you don't have a good answer for something, then lie. Think about a person you know, think about a famous actor or a character on a TV show or a book, and then just use what they would say. Because it's much better than saying, oh, I've never experienced that. You have to say something, or you have to write something. Don't be afraid to lie. A long time ago, there was a question on the IELTS test that I, the examiner, I hated it. It was a question about boats. And I told my students, just lie. Just say, yes, I own a 100-foot yacht and I go sailing to Europe every year. Nobody's going to check. Your answer sounds great and it's more fun. I hope you found this video useful. There's no magic secret to getting a higher IELTS score. But if you follow these tips, I promise you will get the score you deserve. Because there is a certain skill to doing the IELTS test. But there's no magic secret to improving your English. So what you really need to do is improve your English proficiency and then follow the tips in this video to make sure you get the score you deserve. I wish you happy studies and best of luck on your next IELTS test. Bye-bye.